All right, so group import and export. This is actually something that we in the federal space are very, very interested in because we have a lot of customers that take a bunch of projects from one instance and move it over to another instance, particularly for security reasons. We have a lot of that movement going on. So up until now, we were able to move projects around. Now with groups, we should be able to move things like milestones, labels, badges, epics, all of that can move together. So this is actually very exciting functionality. Unfortunately, I couldn't get enough time to write an app that would actually demonstrate this very clearly. But what I have done is I have constructed Postman requests to actually present this. So similar to how a lot of our export functionality works, there's the API endpoint where you describe the specific ID that you want, and then the endpoint has an export function into it. And when you send that in, so this will be a post method. So this is something that's a gotcha, right? So it's a post for when you want to post the export function. And then it's a get when you want to download that. So just remember that this took me a little while to figure out. I kept doing get for sending in the request, and it was incorrect. So when you do the post, what it does is that it essentially sends a request to GitLab. It says, please export this group out. I actually went and found the ID of the group, which is, if you're not familiar with where that is, it's if you go to the specific group that you're looking at, up at the top, there's a group ID that is displayed. So you can just take that number and then stick that in. Or if you want to do it more programmatically, there's a way to actually query for groups and then get the group ID and stick that in. So once that happens, there's a 202 accepted message that comes back, which is a standard message that says, yep, thank you for your request. I acknowledge that I've got it, but I have nothing more to tell you. I cannot tell you when I'll be done with it, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a little bit of a hit or miss, and it depends on how big the group is and how much data is there and how much load there's on the server, that it might take some time for it to actually prepare and extract it. As far as I know, there are no current notifications around it. Like you're not going to get an email or anything that says your group has been extracted like you do for projects. So I think that's still under development. But what will happen is at some point you can run the download. So it's an export download function that you invoke. And basically, so I'll do send and download. And what it'll do is it'll send the request, and out comes a .gz file, which is the extracted group structure into the file. And then you can take this GZ file and then upload it back up, which I didn't have a place to upload it, so I will just kind of demonstrate it by way of the documentation over here. But basically in the import, you do a groups import, you call that endpoint with the name and the path of where you want to put it in. So that's basically a form field that you pass in with the name and the path of the imported group, and then the file name. So the only trick with the file name is you have to put this @ sign in the path, and then once you put that in, it will basically take that and import that group to wherever you want it to import. This is still the first round of this functionality. So there are still some kinks to be worked out. Like for example, if you re-import that group, what happens? Currently there will be a clash in namespace, and it will just kind of fail. It will not actually update it. So I think that's coming next in terms of how that would function. Any questions on this?
Samir, I assume that it doesn't like recursively go down through and import subgroups that are part of that group. And it'd be nice if it recursively did all the projects within, but probably
So actually,
no. This only takes that.
Yeah, go ahead. It actually does. It should traverse down into any of the subgroups. So like we've integrated the group export import MVC into Congregate so far, and when we migrate it, we just point to the top level group and make the request, and it builds out that structure. All right, if Petter's on the call, he can correct me if I'm wrong, but that's how we've changed our logic for that. So,
That's awesome.
Yeah.
It doesn't do anything with the projects that are in those groups, right?
Correct. We still
Correct.
just use the basic project export import to get that to work.
It just
Yeah.
migrates the parent group tree structure.
Yeah, in the document, like the first line it says is allows you to export group structure and import it into the new location, so that the structure, I'm implying it to be the entire group structure. But then it says when used with project import export, you can preserve the connection. So that's a separate function that you need to still perform to do the projects.
So theoretically, one could write a script that would export the group, and then it would look at what projects were in there using API calls and say, oh, I got this group structure. Now I need these projects. And theoretically, you could do all that at once, I guess, in some
Correct.
script.
Yes, you could write a smart script that could actually do that for you.
Is there any plans to automate that functionality in terms of having the group and the projects being exported? So, for example, if as an example, if a GitLab.com customer wanted to move to self-managed, they could do a group export of their highest level group and then switch across. Or
So there's a thought that, sorry, Samir,
go ahead. Go ahead.
So this was an MVC for us to get through a current migration. So they focused on group structure first, just the structure, because we have the project export import. They're currently refactoring the export import APIs with under the memory team to make it more efficient. So I think that's why they kind of said group structure first, get that done, because then they're refactoring the import API for just the projects next. So it's a lot more memory efficient. So as far as I know, that is the plan, to make that all encompassing. But for the time being, they are two separate APIs. And the best example of this working, I would say right now, is in the Congregate project. So we can post a link. It's a tool we have in PS that's wiring all this stuff together.
Yeah, and there's also the construct of GraphQL that may actually provide that functionality as well. I do not know where that stands in terms of implementing the group piece of it, but a lot of cases we've actually re-implemented the REST API as GraphQL API, and that provides you the multi-level data query and import export functionality in most cases, not all cases, but in most cases. Okay, with that, I will turn it back to Chris unless there are any other questions.
I think, Sherry, did you want to ask your question?
Yeah, I would just, Samir, this is great. Just wondering if you can share your Postman collection so we can iterate on top of your work. It's great, thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. I will take my Postman collection. I will post it on somewhere in the Google Drive or somewhere. I don't know. I'll put it somewhere and then I'll share the link.
Okay. Yeah, we have actually a video right now with the professional services, and I want to see what else we can add to it to simplify the migration from Prime to .com.
Cool.
Lori, did you want to ask your question?
Sure. Like Sherry, we have a customer that's moving from self-managed to .com as well, and since we have an API for group export now, is there any sort of thoughts or maybe a future MVC or something that towards using the UI to do that, or adding it to the UI?
I've not seen it, but that doesn't mean one doesn't exist. There are so many issues out there. I don't know, Michael, do you know if there's such a thing?
Yeah, they started doing the design for the group export import UI, I think earlier this week. I've only been on a couple of calls with Daniel Mora, the UX designer for that, or the product designer for that. So as far as I know, that is planned. I just don't know when they're planning to get it shipped.
Okay, great.
I think that's all the questions.